1152. England. A 5-year-old boy stands before a gallows. King Stephen holds him hostage. The king sends a message to the boy's father. "Surrender the castle, or I end your son." The father sends back his response. "Go ahead and end him. I have the anvils and hammers to make better sons." Stephen receives this message and brings the boy to the execution site. The child sees the trebuchet, thinks it is a swing, asks the soldiers if he can play on it. Stephen cannot end a child who mistakes siege weapons for playground equipment. He keeps the boy hostage, but treats him well. 3 years later, the Civil War ends. The boy goes home. That boy becomes William Marshal, the greatest knight who ever lived. Undefeated in tournaments for 16 years, regent of England, servant to 5 kings. Subscribe if you are not already subscribed. Let us begin. 1135. King Henry I of England passes away without a male heir. His daughter Matilda claims the throne by right of succession. His nephew Stephen seizes it by right of being physically present in England. England descends into civil war, called the Anarchy for obvious reasons. Barons switch sides constantly, chasing land and power and survival. John Marshal, a minor nobleman, initially supports King Stephen, then switches to Matilda when it seems politically advantageous. Stephen besieges Newbury Castle, where John and his family hide. The king demands surrender, or he will end John's son, a hostage taken earlier to guarantee John's good behavior. That hostage is 5-year-old William, 4th son. Essentially disposable in medieval inheritance terms, he keeps William hostage but treats him well for 3 years. The Civil War ends in 1153 with a negotiated peace. Stephen remains king, Matilda's son Henry becomes heir, William goes home. The boy survives his brush with the gallows and goes utterly forgotten. 4th son of a minor nobleman. He will inherit absolutely nothing. No land, no title, no wealth, no prospects whatsoever. At age 12, William is sent to Normandy for knight training, to the household of William de Tancarville, a great magnate. Hundreds of mounted knights charging each other with war lances, then fighting hand-to-hand with swords and maces until someone surrenders. The goal is capturing opponents, ransoming them for horses and armor. Sometimes cash, sometimes land, sometimes just the thrill of humiliation. Serious injuries are uncommon, but happen when knights get overzealous or unlucky. Broken bones and teeth are standard, expected, barely worth mentioning. William enters his first tournament in 1167 at Le Mans. Fights well, captures several knights, shows promise and raw physicality. After the fighting ends, tournament organizers seek him for an award. They find him at a blacksmith shop, with his head on the anvil. His helmet has been beaten so badly it will not come off. The blacksmith uses hammers and pliers trying to pry it loose. It is wedged so tightly around his neck he can barely breathe. They eventually free him and present him with the tournament prize. William realizes tournaments are his path to wealth and reputation. He spends the next 16 years competing across France and Normandy, developing tactics that turn fighting into an art, almost an industry. One favorite tactic: grab opponent's reins, drag him from the field, demand ransom for horse, armor, weapons, whatever the man possesses. Another tactic: hold back from initial charge, let others exhaust themselves, then ride in fresh against tired opponents and collect easy prizes. In 1177, William partners with Flemish knight Roger de Gossy. They keep careful tally of their victories and captured knights. In 10 months of tournament fighting, they capture 103 knights. 103 ransoms, 103 fortunes accumulated methodically. William is becoming wealthy, famous across Europe's tournament circuit. Knights fear facing him because he never loses in single combat. From 1167 to 1183, he remains undefeated. 16 years without a single tournament defeat, an unmatched record. On his deathbed decades later, William claims 500 career captures, 500 knights ransom, their horses and armor taken as prizes. The greatest tournament champion in medieval European history. In 1170, King Henry II appoints William to special duty. He becomes tutor-in-arms to Prince Henry, the young king. Henry II crowned his son co-king at age 15. Meant to prevent succession disputes, instead creates different problems entirely. Young Henry has a crown, no kingdom, authority to no power. His father still rules, still makes decisions, still controls everything. The young king finds outlet in tournaments where he can prove himself. William becomes his mentor, his tactical advisor, his champion fighter. They travel the tournament circuit with teams of hundreds of knights, winning event after event, building young Henry's reputation through violence. For 12 years, they fight together across France and Norman territories. Then, in 1182, disaster strikes from predictable human jealousy. Envious knights spread rumors that William is sleeping with young Henry's wife, Margaret of France. Married to the young king for political alliance. The charge is almost certainly false, fabricated by rivals seeking advancement. But young Henry believes it or pretends to believe it politically. William is banished from court, loses his position and patron. He joins a rival tournament team under Philip of Flanders. For a year, they remain separated while William fights for other lords. In 1183, young Henry falls ill with dysentery during campaign. On his deathbed, he asks William to fulfill a crusading vow, to carry his cloak to Jerusalem and place it there. William agrees, reconciled with his former student even in the end. King Henry II gives William money and horses for the journey. In 1184, William sails to the Holy Land. He spends 2 years fighting alongside Knights Templar against Muslim forces. We know little of his specific actions during this crusade. He apparently commits in secret to joining the Templars on his deathbed, a vow he will fulfill 35 years later when his time comes. In 1186, Henry II recalls William to service. The king needs loyal warriors as his own sons plot rebellion. Prince Richard, Geoffrey, and John all scheme against their aging father. William serves Henry II faithfully through these family betrayals. In 1189, during a skirmish in northern France, William encounters Richard, the future Richard the Lionheart. Charging without proper armor or weapons, William could end the prince easily, stop the rebellion immediately. Richard realizes his mistake and shouts, "Do not end me! I am unarmed!" William responds by running his lance through Richard's horse instead. The prince crashes to the ground, humiliated but alive. William rides away, having made his point about honor and mercy. When Henry II passes away weeks later, Richard becomes king. Richard remembers the man who spared him when ending was easier. He takes William into his service, trusts him despite their past, fulfills his father's promise by giving William an heiress in marriage, Isabel de Clare, one of the wealthiest women in England. Through this marriage, William becomes Earl of Pembroke, a great magnate. At age 42, the landless fourth son finally has lands, has wealth, has title, has power earned through 4 decades of fighting. William serves King Richard during his wars in France and Normandy. When Richard goes on crusade, William helps guard England from Prince John. When Richard passes away in 1199, William supports John's claim. Despite John being treacherous, paranoid, violent, and generally incompetent, William remains loyal because loyalty is what defines him completely. King John trusts almost no one, suspects everyone of plotting. Their relationship is volatile, strained, often openly hostile. But William stays loyal even when John loses Normandy to France, even when John alienates barons through taxation and arbitrary cruelty. In 1215, barons rebel and force John to sign Magna Carta. William is one of the creators and signatories of this document, curbing royal power, establishing rights, creating constitutional precedent for centuries. John passes away in 1216 during French invasion of England. His 9-year-old son Henry becomes king as Henry III. The barons choose William Marshal as protector of the kingdom, regent for the child king, ruler of England in everything but name. William is 70 years old, white-haired, scarred from 5 decades fighting. Most men his age are gone or waiting quietly for the end. William takes command of English forces against French invasion instead. Prince Louis of France controls much of England with rebel baron support. William must defeat a French army and reclaim the kingdom immediately. In 1217, at the Second Battle of Lincoln, 70-year-old William leads. He personally leads the charge into Lincoln's narrow medieval streets, making absolutely certain he is first into town to capture nobles, first to set ransom demands, still thinking like a tournament champion. 6 hours of brutal street fighting against French and rebel forces. William's tactical brilliance and personal courage turn the battle decisively. The French withdraw. The rebellion collapses. England is saved by a 70-year-old man who refused to retire quietly. William negotiates the Treaty of Lambeth in September 1217. His wise treatment of rebel barons ensures peace returns to England. For 2 years, he governs as regent, restoring order and stability. In March 1219, William falls ill and knows his time approaches. He fulfills his crusading vow made decades earlier in the Holy Land, takes vows as a Knight Templar or his deathbed as promised, distributes his clothing to knights of his household and the poor, confesses his sins, makes his peace, passes away May 14th, 1219, age 72 or 73, having served 5 kings faithfully. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Stephen Langton, speaks at his funeral, calls William Marshal the greatest knight who ever lived. News of his passing travels across the Channel to France. The French king and court mourn him as most loyal and wise. William is buried in Temple Church, London, where his effigy remains today, a monument to the landless boy who became regent of England. What survives of William Marshal beyond his stone effigy in London? In 1861, a French scholar discovers a forgotten medieval manuscript, The History of William Marshal, 19,000 lines of verse biography. Subscribe if you enjoyed the knight who thought siege weapons were swings. I will see you in the next one.